A railway built to move orders, soldiers, and supplies became the quickest way for Egypt to stop obeying. In 1919, trains vanished from schedules, tracks were cut, and stations fell silent. The strange part was not that a revolt began. It was that a government made the roads of control into the nerves of its own rebellion. The man at the center was Saad Zaghloul, a lawyer, former minister, and strong voice for Egyptian self-rule. After the First World War, he and other leaders asked Britain to let Egypt speak for itself at the peace talks. They formed the Wafd, a word meaning delegation. Their demand sounded simple. Egypt should decide Egypt's future. Britain did not hear a request. It heard a threat. British forces had occupied Egypt in 1882, and British officials still held the real power, even when Egyptian ministers remained in office. On March 8, 1919, authorities arrested Saad Zaghloul and sent him into exile in Malta with other Wafd leaders. The plan was clear. Remove the head, and the body would weaken. Instead, the body began to move. News of the arrest spread through Cairo, then down the Nile and along the railway lines. Students walked out of schools. Workers stopped work. Farmers joined protests. Egyptian railway workers understood the system better than almost anyone. They knew which lines carried troops, which stations passed orders, and which bridges joined one town to the next. Their choice carried a heavy risk. A railway worker did not need a weapon to be dangerous to the occupation. A missed signal, a stopped engine, or a broken line could delay a whole chain of power. But the British could answer with arrests, beatings, shootings, and military force. Every silent train became both a sign of courage and a possible death sentence. The railways had been built as tools of colonial control. They linked ports, cities, farms, and military posts. They helped move cotton and goods, but they also helped rulers reach people far from Cairo. In 1910, that same network carried another force. Anger moved through it. So did news, fear, and hope. The damage was not only symbolic. Railway lines were cut, trains were stopped, and transport links were destroyed in places across Egypt. British reports and later investigations recorded the struggle to restore movement. Wafd papers and newspapers carried a different record, one shaped by the needs of a national revolt. The sources agree that the uprising spread widely. They do not always agree on every death or on the role of each local leader. That uncertainty matters. A clean story would name one hero, one order, and one result. The surviving evidence shows something harder to control. There was no single hand directing every act. Local people made local choices. Some followed Wafd organizers. Some acted from anger at years of foreign rule. Some may have joined because their neighbors did. A revolution can have a center without having one command. In Cairo, students became one of the first loud signs that the arrest had failed. Their marches carried the dispute from offices into the streets. The young were not simply repeating a speech from a distant leader. They were testing how much fear the authorities could create and how much fear the crowd could bear. The answer changed when workers joined them. Strikes slowed daily life and showed that power did not live only in government buildings. It lived in clerks, drivers, railway crews, shop workers, and men who kept food and messages moving. When those people stopped, the occupation felt its own weight. Beyond the capital, villages entered the story. Railway lines crossed fields and linked rural communities to the state. Cutting them could isolate a town, but it could also bring soldiers. The act was never safe. It could protect a protest from quick military movement, or expose ordinary people to punishment when the troops finally arrived. The revolt also broke a habit of imperial thinking. British officials often treated Muslims and Coptic Christians as separate groups, as if they could never share a national cause. In 1919, people from both communities joined the protest. That unity was not perfect, and it did not erase every old tension, but it challenged the idea that Egypt could be ruled by dividing Egyptians. Women, too, entered the public struggle. They marched and took part in protests, while older accounts often gave them less space than male leaders and students. Their presence showed that the crisis had crossed the line between politics and home. Foreign control was no longer only a matter for ministers. It touched families, work, travel, safety, and the future of children. For many women, public protest meant stepping into danger in a society where political streets were often treated as male ground. Their actions carried a double burden. They faced the power of the occupation, and they faced the judgment of people who thought women should remain outside public conflict. The record is not complete, but the evidence is strong enough to reject the old picture of a revolution made only by men. The British response revealed the fear beneath the official calm. Troops were used to guard transport and restore order. Arrests followed. Reports counted damage, searched for leaders, and tried to turn a national crisis into a problem of crime. That language had a purpose. If the revolt was only disorder, then Britain could claim the right to punish it. If it was a national demand, Britain would have to answer it. Saad Zaghloul remained in exile, while the movement he was meant to silence grew larger. This was the central reversal. His absence made him more powerful as a symbol. People who had never met him could still understand the insult. A leader chosen by Egyptians had been taken away by a foreign authority, but symbolism alone did not stop trains or fill the streets. The revolution lasted because thousands of people made the symbol real through work, refusal, protest, and risk. The famous name gave the movement a face. The railway worker, the student, the farmer, and the woman in the march gave it a body. Britain was forced to change its policy. In 1922, it declared Egyptian independence. Yet the declaration left British influence and military rights in place. Independence arrived with locks still on some doors. The flag of freedom could rise while a foreign power kept vital claims over Egypt's security and wider affairs. That unfinished result explains why 1919 cannot be reduced to a simple victory. The revolution won recognition that Britain could no longer rule Egypt in the old way. It did not remove every British power. It opened a path, but not a clean escape. The people had forced the empire to retreat, then found it still standing nearby. The railway tells the story best. It was built to make colonial control faster, stronger, and harder to resist. In 1918, its lines became the nervous system of a national revolt, carrying the shock from one community to another. Saad Zaghloul's exile helped start the uprising, but exile did not create it from nothing. It exposed what was already alive beneath the tracks. a country learning that the machinery built to command it could also be made to stop. If you want to uncover more forgotten history, subscribe for new stories every week.